Hi, Smarter News. We have several news items to set the table for the week ahead. We're building off of some of the big stories we've been covering over the last several weeks and some original reporting that we've done. So let's go ahead and get started, get you ready for the week ahead. In order to look forward, I'm actually going to look back a little bit on what happened last week. President Biden gave his first joint address to Congress. This is notable because he's marking 100 days in office. And often when we see the president make these sort of speeches, this president and others, there's prepared remarks that are released to the press and the public ahead of time. It's the way that we can all follow along and see what the president is actually going to say. It's always notable to see what doesn't actually get included in the prepared remarks. These things could be late ads. They could be purposely left out of a speech. We don't often know. But when you see something appear in a speech that wasn't part of the prepared remarks, you definitely take notice. And I took notice when the president was speaking about competition. He was saying that Americans need to not only compete with each other, but compete on the world stage. And he said this about China's president, President Xi.
I tell you, I spent a lot of time with President Xi. He's deadly earnest about becoming the most significant, consequential nation in the world.
That term, deadly earnest, really caught my attention because it wasn't in the prepared remarks. And also, it made me think back to this interview we recently did with Gordon Chang, a foreign policy expert who lived and worked in China and has really been studying China for years. Here's what Gordon said about Chinese leader, President Xi.
Well, Xi Jinping has been hinting that he is the world's only legitimate ruler, which means that countries like the United States should are colonies of China, in his view. He talks about this notion of tianxia, or all under heaven. And this was what guided Chinese emperors for 2 millennia of rule, where they believed that they had the mandate of heaven over tianxia. And they were not only had the right to rule the world, they believed that heaven compelled them to rule the world. So Xi Jinping has been peddling these tianxia narratives through his speeches and writings and things.
In my reporting, I haven't really heard the Chinese government or Chinese leaders described in that way. So you take that little bit from Gordon, you take the little bit from President Biden talking about China's desire for global domination, and a picture is emerging. Now, why? Why did the president decide to add in these remarks about China? We don't know why, but those remarks do come ahead of a major meeting that's happening in Europe. America's Secretary of State is meeting with other members of the G7 this week. That includes major European leaders in Canada and Japan, and they're setting aside a whole evening to talk about China. So this is just a story to keep an eye on. We'll be watching any headlines coming out of the meeting of the G7, but just thought this was an important story to put on your radar. We don't know what it all means yet, but it's something to watch. China is the largest country in the entire world by population. Its neighbor, India, is the second largest with more than 1 billion people. And I'm sure you've seen these headlines about India just being the epicenter for the COVID-19 pandemic. This wasn't the case only a few weeks ago. So why is this happening? There's no one clear, definitive answer. The answers are going to sound very familiar to you because you've heard about these being debated as why we see surges in America all of a sudden. Some say, well, maybe this is a mutant variant of the virus that causes COVID-19. Maybe it's because restrictions were relaxed. There's any number of reasons, but right now, according to the Washington Post, 1 out of every 3 cases on the planet of COVID-19 are happening inside India. And just to give you an idea of why the population matters, right here in the United States, you have health officials applauding that we have 100 million adults fully vaccinated against COVID-19. That's about 40% of our adult population. For India to reach about 40% of their population, they would need to vaccinate 400 to 500 million people. So 4 to 5 times what we've already done. That is a huge feat, and they've had all sorts of problems. Even though the company that's the largest vaccine producer in the entire world is based in India, they just haven't been able to do it. Now, we know that vaccines are only one part of this puzzle, right, of how you actually can help keep people safe against this virus. And one of the things that we've talked about in recent weeks are antivirals. Last week, the Pfizer CEO came out and said that they're developing a pill that's currently in trials. You pop it in your mouth, And it would be an antiviral against COVID-19 to stop basically the virus from replicating in your body, which is one of the reasons that the virus causes these problems inside your body. So this pill is in trials right now. And they say, the Pfizer CEO says that if it goes well, we could see this antiviral pill maybe even available by the end of this year. Meanwhile, a little closer to home, I'm keeping an eye at the U.S. southern border. Why is that? I'm waiting for fresh data. As you know, in March, we saw a record number of people apprehended at the U.S. southern border, more than 170,000. That's the most we've ever seen in modern data collection. So no matter which way you try to slice this cake, that was a significant month. It also was significant because we saw a record number of unaccompanied minors, so those 17 years old and younger traveling without a guardian. The question is, what does this trend look like? Yes, we saw increases in apprehensions over the last several months. Was April another record month? Did the trend continue in the same way? This is what I'm waiting to see. And usually Customs and Border Protection releases the data for the previous month 7, 8, 9, 10 days after the first of the month. So I was checking today to see if they released it. They haven't released it yet, but that's what I'm going to be watching for. In the meantime, because I was on Customs and Border Protection website, I was seeing some of their other media releases, and this one caught my attention. It said, make sure to buy mom the real thing on Mother's Day. They are highlighting that Customs and Border Protection does a lot of work, beyond the U.S. southern border, including picking up counterfeit goods. You want to know how many counterfeit goods they found in designer handbags, fake designer handbags, jewelry, and accessories in Chicago alone? Nearly $636,000 of those sorts of goods. So just something to keep in mind if you're going Mother's Day shopping, and just kind of widens our view about what Customs and Border Protection does beyond the U.S. southern border. Speaking of motherhood, have you seen this story about a child being injured by a Peloton treadmill? Peloton makes those exercise bikes, treadmills that you could have at home and take classes. Full disclosure, I have a Peloton bike. And this has been a story I've sort of watched out of the corner of my eye because a child was injured on the treadmill. One other child died. And there's been sort of this question about whether or not Peloton should recall all of these treadmills, or was this really a lack of parental supervision? It just got us thinking at Smart News. A lot of us would probably love to have treadmills at home, but a lot of us probably don't have a treadmill. So what are the common items in your home that actually could be dangerous to your children? We're actually looking at a report on that, a little bit of a smarter angle to this story. And in our research, you want to know an item I would have never expected that showed up? Houseplants. I bet some of you with pets already know this, but to me, it never even crossed my mind that a plant, I got one right here, could be poisonous to my children. And so this is again a kind of a smarter twist on a big headline that you might have seen. So we're working on that. So expect that this week. But I'm curious what you'd like to hear more about. So direct message us, email us, hello@smarternews.com. We love hearing from you, and we can't wait to continue to deliver quick, concise, nonpartisan news for you on a regular basis. So thank you so much for your support. All of these stories on smarternews.com.